It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm very happy to talk to all of you. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be back at the Grassroots Cafe. Mike and Karen McLean have an incredible establishment here. For those of you who have not had the deep-fried carrots or the deep-fried broccoli, you've missed an enormous treat. And I also appreciate the fact that Mike and Mikhail have been enormous supporters of the fair tax and enormous supporters of the freedom movement in Western North Carolina. So, Mike, it's great to be back here. So we're back here again, and I have to tell you, this is one of the very first places that I was when we started running for Congress last year, as you probably know. I did run in the Republican primary for Congress last year. And so one of the very first places we started was right here at the Grassroots Cafe. One of the first speeches I made, one of the first meetings we had. So this is sort of a very special place for me, and I'm very glad that we were able to come back here tonight. So I was given a list of things to talk about tonight. I was going to talk about, or I'm supposed to talk about, and I will, Agenda 21, Standard & Poor's downgrade of the U.S. credit rating from stable to negative, free market and the effect it has on this country, healthcare and its protocols, and the Fed. Now, what we could probably say about this is, those are the 5 greatest threats to our freedom that we currently have. Those 5 items, and they're all really linked together. So let's talk about them. And first of all, let me say to you that I've been doing, since the primary last year, I've been traveling around the district, and I've been speaking to groups, and I've been speaking to a lot of people, and I've been listening to what they have to say. And if I were to tell you the one thing that I hear from most people is that most people feel that they are no longer in control of many aspects of their life. That would be the #1 theme that I hear. You look at what the government is doing, you look at rules and regulations, things of that nature, things that the government is making us do, and what do you feel? You feel, if I could change that, I would like to change it, but I can't. And what has happened to us is that government bureaucracy has grown so powerful and so big that unnamed, unelected people, men and women in Washington, D.C., a far, far off place, are making decisions that affect every aspect of our lives. And the sad part is, we are totally powerless to change or even challenge the decisions. Let's take a simple thing, the S510, the food bill. We live in a place here in Western North Carolina where many, many people grow their own food. I mean, where I live on a farm. I have a bunch of chickens. I sell eggs. I sell eggs in my office. It's pretty funny, actually, because some of the patients say, I'm sorry to see Dr. Eichenbaum's doing so poorly, he has to supplement his income. But the point I'm making is that a lot of people where we live augment their income, or even have as their main income. They grow in a garden, bigger than a small garden, and then they sit by the roadside and they sell their products. They sell, you drive by and you stop in. It's funny, around the corner from where we live, there's a local boy and his wife. They have a couple kids, and she takes in kids, she babysits, that's how they earn a living. And they've been there for generations. And he started out, on the corner there, and it's his land, okay, on the corner there, he cleared the land off. And he started selling produce. He sat out there with a chair and a table. Okay, and he'd sell, there'd be a basket of tomatoes and cucumbers and things like that. Well, about a month later, there's a beach umbrella there with one of those tables on it. So he's got a little shade. It's not bad. So he's kind of coming up in the world. A couple months later, I see there's some construction materials there. And lo and behold, over the next month, he builds a little house there right by the side of the road. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, if this lasts another week, some inspector from Fannin County is going to be over there and tell him to take it away. But so finally he builds a house and then he puts a roof on it. He's got a window, triple track window in it, a door, and a porch. Okay, so he builds the porch out there next. Then he brings in a wood splitter and he starts splitting wood. He brings in a smoker and he starts smelling smoke barbecue. And so the guy, over the period of about 6 months, he establishes a little store right by the roadside. So I said to him, I said, Jamie, I mean, I've known him for years, and I said, Jamie, I said, what are you doing? You're building this whole building and you're just set up shop. He's probably about this far from the road. I kid you not. He's about 3 feet from the road. I said, aren't you there? I mean, there's no setbacks. He says, there's no, what are you doing? I said, they told me, my friend told me, not they. My friend told me that as long as the building is not attached to the ground, they can't do a thing. I'm not telling you this as a joke. I mean, it's a joke. If I had taken a picture, and it is nice. I mean, he really finished this out. He's got it nice. And so every time you drive by now, he's sitting there in this rocking chair, and he's got one of those recliners on the porch. Right? I kid you. He's got a recliner on the porch, and his wife is there. And there's 4 kids, and they've got all their toys there, and the kids are playing, and he's busy doing business by the roadside. And I drive by, and he always says, Dr. Dan, he says, come here. It goes like this. I want to sell you something. So how can you go by there without buying a tomato? So I got him back. I'm negotiating with him now. I'm trying to get him to buy one of my a 2-year-old horse of mine, because I breed, ride, and train horses. But I've got a really nice 2-year-old that he's been looking at. So I said to him, he says, how much you want for the horse? He starts off like this. He says, I have a check of yours that you used to pay me for the wood I delivered, and I haven't cashed it yet. So how about I give you back the check and you give me the horse? I said, okay. I said, here's what we're going to do. You want that horse? I want 2 cords of wood delivered. And last year you brought me a truckload of square bales with 50 bales in it. I'll take that for the horse. And $50. I knew he was going to get stuck on the $50 because he doesn't want to give me the cash. So he says, I don't know. So that's where we are in the bargaining process now. But the point I'm trying to make to you is here is a man who has done what is completely natural and normal for America. He's an entrepreneur. He's got a product and a service to sell. The service being splitting wood, splitting wood, growing vegetables, whatever. He's got products to sell. And he sets up a little place to do that business. I really cannot believe that the time is not going to come when some officious SAD bureaucrat from Fannin County, because he's just right across the line, is going to come up to him and say, I'm sorry, you can't sell those tomatoes here. You can't sell those onions here. And you can't be in business, you can't build this house 3 feet away from the roadway without a permit. And that's kind of the situation that we're all in right now. S510 makes what he's doing completely illegal. And impossible. Because he doesn't have paperwork. He doesn't have ledgers about how he grew the tomatoes, what fertilizer he used, how much fertilizer he put on the roots. He doesn't have that data. And so therefore, according to this bill, he can't be in business. That sort of crushes the spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit of our country, the spirit that made this country great. That is the free market at work. And that's one of the most important things that we ever had in America, was the free market. You hear today people talking about capitalism, and they're saying capitalism is bad. Well, I'll tell you, the form of capitalism we have in this country right now is bad, because it's not capitalism, it's crony capitalism. And that is something that is not good, because what is happening is that the free market is being distorted by government bureaucracy. The government is stepping in and said, we like you, we're going to make sure you succeed, and we're going to make sure you fail. If you need help, you're not going to get it. And we're going to make some regulations that favor this guy and don't favor you. And that's crony capitalism. So when the government gets involved and says, we're going to decide who succeeds and who fails, that is not good. That is not the free market. That is not what made this country great. And that is what we are fighting against. That's what we're fighting against now. You know, Ludwig von Mises of the Austrian school, he said many incredible things, but one of the things he said was, and you know, what we have now is a mixed economy. We have a mixed economy because it's free market, but then the government comes in and starts controlling things. And what he said was, a mixed economy is socialism by installments. And that is exactly what has happened to us over the last 100 years. The more the government has become involved in the day-to-day workings of the free market, the more distorted the free market becomes, and the less free we all become. The less able Jamie is to have a little shack by the roadside, sell me tomatoes, and the less I am able to bargain with him for his goods and services, for my goods and services between two independent people, which is what the basis is of the free market. And that's what's happened to us. And so what's going to happen if a bureaucrat comes to him and says, you need to take your shack down. You cannot sell your goods and your wares here on this corner anymore. You don't have the paperwork. You don't have the $200 permit. You don't have the proper, whatever, variances, log books, whatever you're supposed to have, you don't have it. We're shutting you down. And what they will do is they will nail a sign on his building that says, out of business. What is his alternative? What can he possibly do? The answer is nothing. And that is what we're talking about right here now. Because when the bureaucracy goes against you and puts that out of business sign on your business, you have no options. You cannot call them. You cannot talk to them. You cannot throw rocks at them. There is absolutely nothing that you can do. To me, that ain't America. And that's the problem that we've run into. We have allowed a group of people who under ordinary terms and under ordinary circumstances are insignificant, powerless, petty individuals. They have no special talents, no gifts, no great intelligence, and no power, until you put them in a government position where with a stroke of a pen, they can tell you what to do. They can shut down your school. They can kick you out of your house. They can turn off your water, turn off your electricity because you didn't file the right paperwork. And then you get that picture in your mind, do you not, of rows and rows and rows back in the 1800s of probably a novel written by John Dickens, you know, what's his name?
Dickens.
Charles Dickens. Who's John Dickens? Who the Dickens is John Dickens? Anyway, so there's, imagine Charles Dickens, and in this room is rows and rows of all these officious bureaucrats sitting there with their quill pens, writing, and that's what we're up against. And they are in Washington, D.C. And the problem is, they're not elected by you, they were not appointed by you, but they are paid by you, and they have an inordinate amount of power over every single aspect of your life. So when you say, I'm losing control, I don't have control of my life, it's because of them. And we let it happen. I let it happen. Every single one in this room has been asleep for a long time. I know I've been asleep for a long time. You know, you live your life, things go by, stuff happens, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you realize that everything that you cherished, everything that you wanted to pass on to your children has been taken away from you. And it's been taken away from you by the government. An expansive, oppressive federal government that knows no bounds, knows no when to stop. And that's what we're dealing with. So, I've listened to a lot of people. And that's the theme. The theme is, I no longer control my life. Oh yeah, I can drive to the store. Can't even do that much with gas getting up to $5, but I mean, you can do the small things. But when it comes to important things, it is no longer in your control. As a physician, I think I feel this very acutely. You know, Obamacare is a terrible thing. Many people in this room will die because of Obamacare, okay? But it did not start with this bill. It started when we allowed the government to get involved in the practice of medicine and in the delivery of medicine. Before the government was involved, what happened? Well, there was a free market in medicine. That's the way it was. My parents were both pediatric dentists. They practiced together for 50 years. You ever heard that expression, over my dead body? My parents met over my dead body. Not my dead body, but over a dead body. They were cadaver partners in medicine. Well, I'll tell you, you may have said the magic words, but you know, the funny thing is that back in those days, they didn't let women didn't go to dental school. They weren't allowed. It turned out my grandfather, well, first of all, my grandparents were legal immigrants to this country 100 years ago. My mother's father came here as a young boy, decided that he wanted to go to dental school, and he went to work in a factory, Skinner Chuck in New Britain, Connecticut, to earn enough money to go to dental school. And then he went to dental school. He then met my grandmother there in Baltimore, Maryland, and came back to New Britain, Connecticut, and opened up a practice. And they had 2 children, 2 girls. My Aunt Libby was the oldest one by 7 years, and she did the acceptable thing. She went and became a teacher. That was okay. They let women become teachers. Okay. My mother, 7 years younger, said to my grandfather, I want to be a dentist like you. And he said, well, my grandfather was a pretty with it guy. He said, if you want to be a dentist, fine, go ahead. I'm going to make it happen for you. Turned out one of his dental school classmates became the dean of the dental school at the University of Maryland. And that's the only way that my mother got into dental school. And when she got into dental school, colleagues of my grandfather came to him and berated him, saying, you should not let your daughter go to dental school. She's supposed to get married and have children. That's her job in life. Well, thank God. Anyway, so they went to dental school. Her maiden name was Dunn, D-U-N-N. My father's name, of course, was Eichenbaum. So the DMV, and they ended up sharing a cadaver. So, they went over my dead body. So that's an aside. But the point I'm making to you is that back in those days, practitioners of medicine and dentistry understood that they had a moral obligation to be charitable. And they took care of patients for free who couldn't pay. That was just the way it was. My parents had what they called Free Friday. Every Friday of every week, they took care of indigent children. They were children's dentists, okay? They only took, after 19, they didn't see. So that every Friday, they saw children who had no money for free. And most physicians that I know, or remember from that era, they did the same thing. They took care of everyone. The ones that could pay, paid. The ones that didn't pay, didn't pay. And everyone got care. There weren't people dying in the streets. So that was true free market medicine. If we had that kind of system today, what would it be like? Well, you'd have to have insurance for catastrophic conditions, wouldn't you? One of the problems we have today is that automobile insurance does not pay to change your windshield wipers, to change your oil, to change your oil filter, does it? No. And your homeowner's insurance does not pay to paint your house, doesn't pay to, put a new roof on or things like that. But what it does do is you have insurance for the catastrophic things. If you get into an auto accident, you have a policy that takes care of the accident. Well, health insurance now for us has become the type of thing where we don't understand the cost of medical care because it pays for everything if you have insurance. That's not the way it should work, because if you don't have to pay for it out of your pocket, it has no value to you. So one of the things we could do to have a free market healthcare system would be to have insurance that was you could purchase anywhere in the United States where all 1,200 insurance companies could compete for your business, okay? And you could buy a policy that was tailored to your needs. If you were 25 years old and in great health, you wouldn't have to worry too much about a lot of stuff. You could have a high deductible. It wouldn't cost you very much. The second part of that equation, of course, is tax-free healthcare savings accounts, which is essential if you are to control your health care. Why is that important? You put money away every single month into an account that grows tax-free. When you spend it for medical reasons, it is tax-free. You don't have to pay for it. You can pay for your well care, for your medications, for a lot of things, anything related to health care you can pay for out of a healthcare savings account without it being taxed. This then allows you the freedom to bargain with doctors. You go in for a checkup and he wants to charge you $125, and you say, hey, I don't want to pay that. Well, if there's enough doctors around, he'll say, okay, I'll give it to you for $100. Nothing wrong with that. But you can't do that. Doctors cannot bargain now. There's no way that we can bargain. We're not allowed to. If we don't charge what Medicare says we have to, we can go to prison. We can get fined. So that's what happens when the government meddles in what should be a free market system. So if you take tax-free healthcare savings accounts, you take insurance that you can purchase by competing companies anywhere in the United States, and you get exactly the coverages you want, then you have a system that you control yourself. You have tax-free healthcare savings accounts that belong to you. What happens if you pass away? Your heirs get that money. It's certainly not like Social Security, the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of Earth. It makes Bernie Madoff look like a two-bit scam artist. You don't own that money. You put in thousands and thousands of dollars into Social Security. What happens? You pass away, your widow gets $225 or something like that. They've stolen all that money from you. They've stolen it. That's not a good system, is it? So if we're talking about health care, what happens under plans like Obamacare? Well, the first thing that happens is that the government has decreed that there are only 4 acceptable insurance policies that you can get. And then they go on to say that those insurance companies who give you those policies can't raise their rates if they're not making any money. What's going to happen? They're going to stop issuing the policies. What does that mean? Since you are required under the law to have a health insurance policy, you're going to get dumped into the government option, aren't you? So, right, another lie by the liar in chief. Another lie that tries to tell you everything is going to be okay when realistically it's not. So, how does this affect you? I'm not going to go into great detail about the health care bill. I'm sure you all know that from a philosophical point of view, it is based on the philosophy of Peter Singer and Ezekiel Emanuel. Is there anyone in this room who believes in infanticide? Raise your hand. Anyone believe in killing living babies?
No.
Anyone? Of course not. No sane or moral person would. Peter Singer, MD, okay, he does.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Should the Baby Live? And in that book he said that if the baby comes out and the parents don't think it's really good for one reason or another, up to 4 weeks of age, you can kill the baby. That's what he said in the book. That's in my book. We're not even talking about abortion. This has nothing to do with abortion. This is talking about babies who come out alive. They're in the world, and you got 4 weeks to decide whether you want to keep them or kill them. Where is it? That's Peter Singer, is his name. He wrote the book, Should the Baby Live? And he's one of the authors of the Obamacare bill.
Right.
Now, where is Peter Singer? What is his position in life now? You're going to love this. He holds the chair, the professorship of medical ethics at Princeton University. Anyone here graduate from Princeton University? If you do, please stop sending them money. So that's number one. And together with Ezekiel Emanuel, they wrote a book or a concept called the Complete Lives Method. The Complete Lives Method basically says the same thing. You can kill babies that aren't perfect, and after about the age of 45, you really aren't contributing to society anymore, so you don't get any medical care except to make you comfortable as you're dying. And that goes back to cases like the Barbara Wagner case in Oregon. Oregon is a very progressive state. You know they have the assisted suicide law in Oregon. Well, Barbara Wagner had breast cancer and she was on Medicaid, and she had gotten to the point where she needed a medication to save her life that was very expensive. Well, so the doctor said, we need this medicine, and Medicaid in Oregon said, no way, we're not paying for the medicine, however we will pay for assisted suicide. Well, that's what you're facing. Pardon me. That is exactly what you're facing with Obamacare, because the people who constructed that bill believe in that system. They believe that that is how you treat people. That is the moral code that they believe is a moral code. I believe it is an immoral code, and it must be repealed. The biggest danger for all of you in the Obamacare bill is Section 3407. 3407 is a section that deals with the cost effectiveness of medical care. 15 people, appointed people, decide what treatments are cost effective and what treatments are not cost effective. All right. You want to save some money, you think maybe that's not so bad. The problem is these are not physicians. These are bureaucrats. And their job is only to save money, not to save your life. So what cost effective to them means is, how old are you? Are you worth the dollars that we're going to spend on you? Is this care cost effective for you? The answer, of course, if you're 65, no matter who you are or what you are, is probably no. Unless you have a friend in high places, and we all know that nepotism is an enormous part of what goes on in this administration. However, going back to reality, this 3407 specifies that they will decide not only who gets what care, but what order that care will be given to you. So, how does that work? I've been a physician for 34 years. I treat many, I'm an ophthalmologist, so I treat a lot of different eye diseases. Believe me, over time, I know what works. I know what drops to give. I know what treatments to give under a lot of circumstances. How do I know that? Not because I read it in a book. I know that because I've treated hundreds of thousands of patients with the same exact condition, so I know how to treat them. So what does the government now say? It now says, okay, a patient comes in with this diagnosis, and everything is by code. So you submit a code, and you say, I want to treat this patient. Well, the government says, with this diagnosis, the first thing you try is this. If that doesn't work, you can go to number 2. If number 2 doesn't work, you can go to number 3. Number 3 doesn't work, you go to number 4. Okay? That's what they're requiring us to do in the Obamacare bill. What happens if I know that number 1 and number 2 don't work? I already know they don't work. I've been doing this for 34 years. I know number 1 and number 2 don't work. So I want to go right to number 3, which I know works. What happens if I do that? Well, the second part of 3407 provides for fines and imprisonment of physicians who don't follow the rules. So what Obamacare does for physicians is puts them in an ethical and a moral bind of not being able to do what's right for patients, things that they know are right for patients, under penalty of being fined lots of money, not small amounts of money, lots of money, or being imprisoned for up to 5 years. So if you come in with conjunctivitis and I want to use number 3, I don't know if I want to risk going to prison for 5 years over it, you know? And that's what the problem is with this bill. The problem intervenes to the point where physicians are no longer free to interact in a free market way between their patients and themselves, to decide what's best. I sit down now with patients, I give them a list of options. I'm not going to be able to do that. So what happens in 2014 if this bill is not repealed? Huge numbers of physicians are going to quit. And what does that mean for you? No medical care. Or wait a long time. The history of medical care in socialized medicine countries is wait in line. And hopefully a percentage will die waiting in line. That is the theory in socialized medicine. It's a theory in socialized anything. Look what happened in the Soviet Union with food. Who had food in the Soviet Union? The party guys, the party bosses, all had food because they could shop at a goods store. Everyone else lined up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get one of the 10 loaves of bread that were available for the day. That's why socialism doesn't work. That's why the free market does work. Because you have the ability to interact one person to another person for goods and services. So, are we losing control? Yes, we are losing control. Day by day, piece by piece, they're taking away your life. Look at some of these other things that I just talked about, healthcare. I'm going down this list, it's a great list. We talked about the free market in healthcare. Agenda 21 is another enormous threat to our freedom. And this, you know, when you talk about things like this, people say this is a conspiracy theory and you are a nutcase. I'm not a nutcase, and this is not a conspiracy theory. Because in 1994, in Rio de Janeiro, the UN convened a meeting called the Conference of Rio. And in that Conference of Rio, they outlined Agenda 21, which is the United Nations World Plan for the 21st century. That's what Agenda 21 means. What does this involve? Well, it involves some concepts which I find to be kind of unusual, and so would you. But they're happening to us right now, right this very moment. One of the concepts is that man is not the master of Earth. That animals, rocks, trees, and whatever are all on an equal par with man. And they're serious. Now, last week, some groups in California came out with this proposition about rocks. Rocks and people were equal. I understand it's California. However, if they had their way, okay, that would be the way the world was run. Bugs equal to human beings. The United Nations came out with something about a month ago, or less than a month ago, talking about the equality of insect life with human life. Personally, I don't like insects very much, and I kill them as often as I can. I was with a group of people last week, and one of the people there said, if I could press a button and kill every single insect on Earth today, I would do it. Okay? He didn't like insects either. But the bottom line is Agenda 21 is not a conspiracy theory, it is real. They feel that the only way we can exist as humans is if our activities are sustainable. And what they mean by sustainable is that we don't take out more than we put in. So in other words, everything has got to be renewable to the point where we're not disturbing anything on Earth at all. The problem with that is that in order to achieve anything close to that, the Earth's population really couldn't be more than about 500 million people. 500 million people, okay? So what's going to happen to the other 6.5 billion people on Earth? Their plan really is to starve them to death. And S510, which we started out talking about, is one of the bills that they would propose to control agriculture so that the food supply would be impaired. This is not a new concept. Stalin starved 35 to 45 million people in the Ukraine during the 40s and 50s. He starved them to death. Okay? He had his agenda, but the United Nations has its agenda. And their agenda is to reduce Earth's population to the point where Earth and human beings live in some kind of a harmonious peace with back in the Stone Age, basically, because the things that are not sustainable are electricity, farming, golf courses, things like that we take for granted. All of those are things that the United Nations wants to do without and to reduce our population to achieve. So what does this do? When you look at the things that they have implemented in our country, all of these green belts, green areas, all of this is the beginning of Agenda 21 on a surreptitious basis in our lives on a day-to-day basis in our cities. Go to progressive cities like Durham or Chapel Hill. They have green belts, they have areas where people can't go, and that's what they're trying to do. Agenda 21, for us, what they want is to reforest America and move us into high-rise buildings in an urban zone where we are not allowed to have automobiles and can only take public transportation and live in a small cubicle barely bigger than each of us. Now, are you going to tell me that I'm a conspiracy theorist for saying this? You can if you want, but I can show you Agenda 21 because it's written. You can go to the internet, you can download it, and you can read it for yourself, because everything that I've told you is written in black and white under the Conference of Rio. from 1994. And they're trying to implement that now. World government, world currency, no freedom for humans. So that's Agenda 21. Very, very lovely prospect. And the one other thing here that we can talk about, which are combined, and that is what is happening to us now financially. And this is probably the most dire thing that is happening to us, is the fact that we have no basis for our money. Our money is worthless paper, not worth the money, not worth the paper it's really printed on. And it's getting worse. You know that in the 1900s, about 100 years ago, a good men's suit cost about $35, which is what an ounce of gold sold for. Today, an ounce of gold sells for about $1,500, which is what a good men's suit costs. What that shows you is that metals hold their value. Metal like gold holds its value. And its purchasing power is the same today as it was 100 years ago. The fact that the ounce of gold is worth $1,500 as opposed to $35 is because of inflation. Because the value of our dollar has decreased. Because a group of men not controlled by you or me, not controlled, the Federal Reserve Bank is printing money. They're printing paper money that has absolutely no backing whatsoever. And every dollar they print is worthless. And the more they print, the less every dollar we have is worthless. 8 to 10 years ago, if you had $10,000 in the bank, that $10,000 is only worth $7,900 today because we've lost 21% of the value of the dollar over the last 8 years. What is that? It's theft. It is theft. The Federal Reserve has stolen 21% of your money from you. Did they hold a gun to your head to do that? No. They did it because they can. Because they are powerful bankers who control the banking industry through the Federal Reserve. Congress has completely abdicated its role. The Constitution says that Congress has the power to control the money, to coin money. Coin to me means something that's hard and usually round and made out of a precious metal. Well, they gave that up. They gave it over to the Federal Reserve, a group of very rich bankers that we don't even know who they are. We don't know what's in the Federal Reserve. We have no idea how much money they've printed, what they've done with it, where they've given it to, because we can't even get to audit the Federal Reserve. A very minimum of good banking practice would be to say, let's see your books. Who owns this bank? How much money you got? What did you do with it last year? Where did all that money go? Where did you print it? And where did it go? We can't do that. And as a result, we are being robbed by inflation, by a dollar that gets worth less and less and less. Who does that hurt? It hurts all of us. It hurts every single one of us because that money is stolen from us. When you go to the store right now, today, what does butter cost? Almost $4 a pound, doesn't it? It wasn't that way 8 years ago, was it? How about gas? Everyone's saying, well, why is gas so expensive? Well, it's so expensive because the dollar is not worth today what it was worth 10 years ago. You can't buy as much. That's why gas prices go up. Commodities go up. Why is food getting more expensive? Because the dollar is decreasing in value. And we have this absolutely insane, stupid program of taking 25 pounds of corn to make 1 gallon of gasohol. Stupid. I'd rather eat the corn, not on the opposite, but I'd rather eat the corn or have it made into food than having it go into my gas tank. It is ridiculous. But all of these things that are being done to us are being done to us because we're allowing it to happen. We are allowing it to happen. And that is why it is time to rise up. It is time to rise up and take back control of our country. 2012 is an absolutely critical year. We are now we're now borrowing 40 cents on every dollar that we spend. We're borrowing money to pay the interest on the money we borrow. When I was running, I likened it to being in college, and this month you use the Visa to pay the interest on your MasterCard, and then next month you use the MasterCard to pay the interest on your Visa. Anyone tried that? It didn't last very long, and fortunately I had a mom and dad to bail me out. So, the bottom line is we have no one to bail us out, but that's what's happening. So we are really on a downward spiral, and that's why Standard & Poor's said, wait a minute, your outlook, your financial outlook just ain't too rosy. You're not just a AAA rated country anymore. Maybe you're not a AAA rated country, because if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to be bankrupt. Of course, we're bankrupt now. The only reason we're not bankrupt, the only reason we're not actually bankrupt is because those printing presses and the Federal Reserve are spitting out money as fast as they can. Anyone remember the Weimar Republic? That's where we're going. And I always remember that one picture of that old man with his Hamburg hat and his little girl with a wheelbarrow full of money going to buy a loaf of bread. You know, in the Weimar Republic, the only way anyone would work was if they got paid in the morning in advance. And then they were given off at 11 o'clock to run out and spend that money. Because by the time, if they waited till the end of the day, the money that they had received in the morning was worthless. It would buy nothing. That's hyperinflation. And how did that happen? The exact same way it'll happen to us, because we are doing exactly the same thing that the Weimar Republic did. Exactly the same thing. And there is no way to avoid that catastrophic meltdown. At some point, the piper is going to have to be paid. And if what happens to you, if the government says, okay, we're going to inflate our way out of the debt, we pay. That money is stolen from us. Every dollar that the Federal Reserve prints is taken right out of your pocket. Directly, right out of your pocket. So that's the circumstance we find ourselves in. And what do we have? We have congressmen who are obsolete because they do nothing. You send them to Washington to do something because they promise it, and what do? Nothing. Why? Because they're all on the take. If you look at where they're getting their money, they're all getting money from PACs, special interest groups, and the like. And then they're in bed with these people. And that is why nothing gets done. What does the administration do? If they can't get something through Congress, what do? They regulate it into being. They regulate it. They forget about Congress. Congress has become obsolete. It has become a nothing. Maybe this year I can be one of the people who will change that, and I hope so. I'm going to leave you with one little story, and I'll probably talk long enough, don't you think?
No, we just
Anyway,
listening to you.
so let me end with one little story. Last February, my wife and I went to Israel. We happened to go on Mike Huckabee's annual pilgrimage, not for political reasons, but for educational reasons, and it was just a good opportunity to go. One of the places we visited, of course, was Yad Vashem, which is the memorial to the 6 million Jews who were slaughtered by the Nazis. And Mike Huckabee told a story that to me was really kind of very important story. We were driving there, he happened to be riding on our bus, and we were discussing Yad Vashem and going to Yad Vashem, and he said, I want to tell you a story. Now, he goes every year. This was his 18th or 19th trip to Israel. And he had gone to Israel, once when his daughter was 12 years old. So he has two boys, older boys, and his youngest child is a daughter. And so when the daughter was 12 years old, they were on one of their pilgrimages to Israel, and they were on their way to Yad Vashem. And Mike and his wife were discussing whether they should have their daughter, their 12-year-old daughter, tour Yad Vashem, because it's a absolutely emotionally drenching experience to go through there and to see the horrors that the Nazis perpetrated on the Jews and other people as well. Because if you've never been there, it's just graphically there. It's in story and in videos and movies. It shows you what happened graphically. And so they were concerned that a 12-year-old girl, would not be able to handle that. But they decided what they would do is they would take her into Yad Vashem, and if things got too intense for her, that they would just take her out. So they went in with her, and she went through the whole Yad Vashem. And when she came out on the other side, she looked at her father and mother, and she said, Mom and Dad, why didn't someone do something? That to me is why I am standing here today, and hopefully why you are all here today. Because if we don't do something now, the country is done and finished. So that is my call to arms to you. Why didn't someone do something is not going to be an excuse this year. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Dr. Dan while he's here?
I do.
Yes.
Say we get the right people in Washington, especially the Obamacare. About. Can it be repealed, and if so, how long would it take? How much money have we wasted, and how long would it take to actually get it repealed?
I think that we have to attack Obamacare in every single way that we possibly can. Through the court system, through defunding it, through attempts to repeal it. But you know, one of the most important ways to get rid of Obamacare is nullification. Do you know what nullification is? I am a firm believer in nullification. You probably know that I'm a constitutionalist. I can't even say the word, but I am one. But the point is that you know that Article 1, Section 8 says to Congress, here are the things you can do. And the 10th Amendment says if I didn't give you permission in Article 1, Section 8, you can't do it. Well, there is nothing in the Constitution about providing medical care for everyone. There's a lot of things in the Constitution that forbid. There's a lot of things that the government is doing, the federal government, that they're not allowed to do. Well, it's time for the states to stand up and say no. Just say no. We almost were successful here in North Carolina. We know that the legislature voted nullification of Obamacare here. The governor, who I'm going to hope and pray, go down on my knees tonight, pray is not there after 2012 election. She vetoed that, and we came up 4 votes short of overriding her veto. But there are lawsuits now in something like 25 or 30 states. Other states are now have nullification rules. And to me, that total combined effort, people going to Washington and absolutely stonewalling everything, if I go to Washington, okay, in 2012, I am going to be the rudest, most obnoxious person in the city of Washington. I promise you. Because I am not going to vote for anything that allows the size of the federal government to increase or to take over control for you. I would sponsor legislation that prevents bureaucrats from doing things. I would take away money from bureaucracies. I would close the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the Department of Homeland Security. They need to vanish. Gone away. Go.
So we need to start local.
But you need to start locally. You need to hold your elected representatives responsible for what they do. We sent Republicans to Raleigh for the first time in 130 years. What have they done? Not a whole heck of a lot by my account. Some are trying, but they haven't accomplished anything, and there's no excuse for it.
You're not listening.
They're not listening. And that's one of the things that we need to do, is to be vigilant about what's going on in Raleigh, because that's our state. You need to be paying attention to what's happening in Raleigh. Look at what goes on a day-to-day basis. Call up your representative and your senator and say, dude, what'd you do that for? That's bad. I don't like that. I'm going to be parading around your office with a big sign unless you stop doing that. Those are the things that you have to do. When it comes to Washington, yes, it's a little more remote. But you need to make sure that the people who represent you in Washington are accountable to you and not to Federal Express or General Electric. And the way you do that is by supporting them financially, working for them, and making sure that they can be elected without being beholden to a bunch of special interest groups. I mean, a lot of money it takes now to be elected. And if you want to be elected, you got to raise the money somewhere. I'm not the Federal Reserve Bank, and I can't print it. I could, but I'd probably go to jail. So the bottom line is that when I say that this is in your hands, why doesn't someone do something? I'm saying, why don't you do something? It really is up to us. You know what percentage of the people in this country actively supported the Revolutionary War? Who knows?
Wonder.
3%. They're the 3%ers. No, not a good. People who actually put their lives on the line and their fortunes on the line was only 3%.
Wow.
So you can make a difference. Your activity makes a difference.
You
Yes.
mentioned earlier on when you're in your talk that people get elected and go to Washington and get in a good boys group and play the game. Okay? Don't take this the wrong way. How do I know you're not going to do the same thing?
Because you'll have access to it.
Right now, yeah.
You'll
Once
have
you get
access
there,
to
I
it.
know.
You know, with the electronic media the way it is today, there's no excuse for you not to be able to get a hold of your representative.
Electronic media doesn't allow me to slap you upside the head, which is what most of us do.
No, for the trip to Washington.
Exactly.
I'm acting a little bit stupid, but
No,
I'm
no,
being
no,
honest.
no, you're
That's
not
how I
acting-
feel.
No, you're not acting stupid. What you're saying is exactly right. I can only tell you that from my point of view, if I'm back here every weekend and I'm holding town halls in every single county over and over and over again, you come and talk to me, okay?
You know, I want to believe you.
Okay.
And I'm serious from the bottom of my heart. But
Here's
I
the
wanted
deal.
to believe everybody else I voted
Right.
for too.
So that's the point. The people who are already there obviously don't do that. So isn't it time for some new blood?
I agree.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is term limits one part of the solution? And if so, how can you ever get that accomplished?
I believe in term limits. Last year when I ran, I signed a bonded term limit pledge, okay? Getting term limits through Congress is going to be a pretty daunting task because most of those people up there want to stay there forever.
It costs a lot of money to get there.
It costs a lot of money to get there. However, the bonded term limit pledge that I signed says that if I can serve 3 terms, if I file to run the fourth term, I owe $500,000 to a charity out in Raleigh that takes care of wounded warriors. It's a very good charity, but I don't have $500,000 to give.
In 6 years, you could have.
That's
What?
right.
In 6 years.
Well, you know, then what it really comes back to is what transparency I would have in terms of how I raise money and where it came from. The less I have to, the less money the money I don't take from individual people is money that is safe money, okay? So my hope would be that I would not take money from PACs, from special interest groups, or things like that, but only from individuals. I can't self-finance a campaign. And that's the reality of the situation, is that if you need the money and you can't self-finance, it has to come from somewhere, or you can't run. Plain and simple. Yes?
I'd like to address what this gentleman brought up. And just to let you know, we have been holding our ladies that are happening that we really like, but we do call up and let them know that we are not happy. We had a situation in Buncombe County where we are trying to get commissioners increased from 5 to 7. And there are Tea Party groups, which is the point I'm trying to make, from all over North Carolina that have nothing to do with Buncombe County, that call every single rep. They will call their reps about that bill because they knew that if they get it passed, and they get it out of the House and into the Senate, and they get it voted on, they then can take that bill and they can apply it to their own particular counties. Well, guess what happened? They passed it in the House, and it's now in the Senate. All right, and this is a bill in Buncombe County. And I will tell you, we endorsed and got behind another representative in Raleigh that we're not happy with. And this guy knows we're not happy with him. And I'll tell you, we have also told the Buncombe County folks over there, they cannot get their officials elected unless they get Tea Party support behind them. So yes, we're going to hold them accountable, and the thing that you have right here in this room is all of these folks, you need to go home and talk to your neighbors, your friends. You need to tell them to get involved. You need to support people like Dr. Dan and other folks, and you need to let them know we are going to get you elected, but we're also going to hold you accountable. And if you do not do the right thing, all right, and you're going to be beholden to special interest groups like this one particular representative that I'm thinking of who's taking funny money, all right, we're not going to support you. And that's the way it's going to be. We may be the 3%, we may be the canaries in the coal mine, but it's got to start somewhere, and we can do it. But if we sit back and say, well, I'm going to throw up my hands and, you know, I can't do anything, well, then we're done. We are really done. And I know for one, you know, we're pretty scared about what's going to happen, but, you know, for every step forward, we take a step back, but then we take another step forward, and we're the only ones that can do it. So we can do it. And that was...
There's power in numbers.
Yes.
I want to give you an example of something small that I got involved with. My hairdresser was charged. She didn't renew her license, and so the inspector, who seemed to find much glee in this, charged her $400 for being an operator without a license, and $400 for having employees while she didn't have the license renewed. She has, yeah, and first time in 30 years she never renewed it. She had no employee. She was a single, anyway, it was close to $1,000 she was owing the state because she was a couple months late with this renewal thing. Ticked me off. I said, I tell you what, I'll help you write a letter. I went home and I researched and found out that the Board of Cosmetic Examiners gives the board the right to levy those charges. The inspector didn't have that right. I did my homework. I read what the state says. You start digging and you find out that the Board of Cosmetic Examiners had an issue with an audit. Thousands of dollars were misappropriated. Now that is something, someone coming, you know, I can't can't think of the term, but anyway, you find out a lot. So I composed this great letter. She wanted to tone it down a little bit, but we challenged it. She got her money back with one letter and a couple of phone calls. And I thought, when you've got right on your side, you can do anything. But you
I
got
think,
right
you know,
on.
that's a very good example. And I will tell you though, you know, Section 3407 of Obamacare, the rulings of that 15-member panel need 3/5 of Congress to undo them. It's written right in the law. 3/5. So they already knew that that was going to be a pretty bad thing. And so they made it right, wrote it right into the law, a very difficult way of undoing the decision.
Right.
I didn't people read the law before they voted for it. I think I heard that before somewhere.
Well, that was Nancy Pelosi.
You didn't know what was in it.
No, but she
You have to pass it to find out what's in it.
I mean, that's just
Again, these are just some of the things that the people in Washington who represent us, they're not really taking good care of their fiduciary's responsibility to be our representatives in Congress. They've abdicated their role. They've abdicated their duties. And if we don't hold them responsible, this time by removing them, it's our fault, not theirs. Yes, sir.
If you go to our website, AshevilleTeaParty.org, there's a title in the menu, it says Contact NC Elected Officials. All the information for email and phone numbers for the local area, in Western North Carolina for your representatives and senators is right there. All the email addresses for your senators and representatives throughout the state of North Carolina is there. And you can mass mail every one of them by cutting and pasting to your email. It's real easy, and you can bombard them with emails like you wouldn't believe.
Does it work?
Yes, ma'am. It has worked for us.
Yes, sir.
As far as, one thing to notice, we don't have a lot of young people here. And sometimes in hiking over the years, I've been outnumbered hiking with some younger guys. And invariably, you get 3 or 4, and you hike them for 3 or 4 hours. Well, yeah, we're supporting your Social Security. Well, finally, it took me a while to, but now I come back and I said, well, yeah, when they started taking our money, when there was no Social Security fund, that's when the Tea Party should have started. I said, yeah, you're going to have to pay for it because the government took it. Of course, they like the word progressive. You know, I mean, the younger generation, they like the word progressive. But I said, yeah, we made a mistake. We should, the Tea Party, something, I don't care what you call it, should have started with the government. They're taking money out of our checks and they're spending it. It's not coming back. But I'd like to say this tongue in cheek a little bit. But your talk might be a little bit outdated because you do know that 2 months ago, they did form a new agency, the Consumer Advocacy Agency. So, I mean, we have somebody looking out for us now.
Let me say something to you. If you believe that agency is going to help you out, there's a bridge in New York that I can send you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Chuck. And I remember things. Executive Order 13,630 something, I think, signed by Clinton, says that any regulation that is set upon us by any unelected bureaucrat, bureau in the federal government, that those regulations trump any state or local laws. That's an executive order that's been in the books for decades.
And that is grossly unconstitutional. But it's there. Well, the point is, what happens is, unless those things are challenged, they stand. And that's why nullification is such an important part of taking back our country. Each state has got to stand up and say, no, we are not going to do it. You know, look at the reality of the situation. Okay, the reality of the situation. How many people are there in China? How many people? 2 billion, 1.5 billion people, right? How many people are there in the armed forces of China? 500,000, maybe? What if those 1.2 billion people rushed the cities to take back control of the government? Do you think the 500,000 people in the army and the military would be able to stop those people? The answer is no. I'm not advocating violence. What I'm advocating is that if every state would stand up and start saying no, 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 and no, what would the federal government do? They can't send people to every state and say, well, yes, you are. You got 50 states, maybe 57, I don't know. But you have 50 states. And if we actively had nullification going on, the federal government would not be able to counter that.
Did you see that Atlas Shrugged movie yet?
I'm going Saturday night. Where we live, it took a little while to get there.
It's right here, and it's even in Flat Rock.
Yeah.
Everybody knows.
As a doctor, if the Republicans are leaving Medicare reform, Medicaid reform, as a doctor, how long do you think you got with Medicare and Medicare before most doctors won't take it anymore?
All I can tell you is that there is a movement of physicians to get out of Medicare now. One of my very close friends from the eastern part of the state has formed a company that actually instructs and enables physicians to drop Medicare and to go cash on Medicare. This entire, what's happening with medicine now is, I'll give you an example, okay? We, 2 years ago, we became totally electronic, or a year and a half ago, but this guy's on 2 years. We're totally electronic in my office. Okay? I fully expected to be able to reduce the size of my workforce. I can't reduce them. You know why? We're electronic, but the government has piled on so many new wrinkles and regulations that it still takes 2 girls full time to file claims. And because, not because they made it, it's because they made it more complex. They made this, you no longer can file this number. It's got to be this number for this circumstance, a subgroup for that, and for that, and for that. So they keep adding on layers and layers and layers of regulations, making it more and more difficult to comply, costing more, and reducing the reimbursement. Medicare is paying me for some items less than it costs me to provide the service. You can't do that forever.
And they want to cut that.
I thought that was an antitrust situation.
What's that?
Them be paying you less than what it costs you to provide that service. I thought that was against the law.
Physicians cannot.
I know it is in the world that I worked in.
But physicians cannot unionize because that is an antitrust situation, because we're all individual corporations.
Does it not apply to everybody? Is it just, and I don't know.
We've all been through this before. We tried, we explored that 20 years ago. And it's already been decided that we cannot unionize or organize. It would be like Ford, GM, Chrysler, and Honda all getting together. They can't. Neither.
If you're not in the Nazi party, you don't get these special deals.
Some time ago, my brother and I were talking about insurance and how to lower the cost, and we came to the conclusion that everybody just paid cash instead of insurance. When I was growing up, I don't remember my parents ever talking about insurance in the mid-50s or whatever. They just paid the doctor, whatever, right? Could. And we came to that conclusion. I was talking to my doctor some time ago about it, and he says, you know, you might have a point, because when we were going just cash only, we collected 99% of our bills. When we went to insurance, I had to hire 4 girls just to handle the insurance and keep on top of it. And I said, you're not getting paid in a timely manner? He says, no. And we're collecting maybe 80% over a period of months. instead of where if we went to cash, we'd get our money right away
Well,
and
that-
lower our costs.
That's the premise of the group in the eastern part of the state, is that if you, when I was a GP, he had a huge staff because of insurance. He dropped everything, it's cash only. He sees fewer patients, he only has one employee plus one tech, it's all cash. All cash, and there's no overhead. He doesn't file anything. So the bottom line is that the more the government gets involved, the more the government distorts the free market, the more it costs you and the less efficient it becomes.
The other thing
I want to thank you all very much. I got a trip home. Before you,
I got one final thing. Did you tell them who's going to be my guest on the Fair Tax Radio next week?
Who?
You.
Oh.